Thank you. Honorable members, before we proceed, I would like to remind you that the virtual mini-plenary is deemed to be in the precinct of Parliament and constitutes a meeting of the National Assembly for debating purposes only. In addition to the rules of virtual sittings, the rules of the National Assembly, including the rules of debate, apply. Members enjoy the same powers and privileges that apply in a sitting of the National Assembly. Members should equally note that anything said in the virtual platform is deemed to have been said to the House and may be ruled upon. All members who have logged in shall be considered to be present and are requested, and I emphasize, to mute their microphones and only unmute when recognized to speak. This is because the mics are very sensitive and will pick up noise which might disturb the attention of the other members. When recognized to speak, please unmute your microphone and connect your video. Members may make use of the icons on the bar at the bottom of their screens, which is an option that allows a member to put up his or her hand to raise points of order. The Secretariat will assist in alerting the chairperson to members requesting to speak. When using the virtual system, members are urged to refrain or desist from unnecessary points of order or interjections. We shall now proceed to the order of this mini-plenary session, which is a subject for discussion in the name of Honorable T S Mpanza on the revolutionary and scientific duty of solidarity and humanity of Cuban doctors in dealing with the global pandemic. I now recognize the Honorable Member T S Mpanza to speak.
Thank you, House Chair and honorable members. During this pandemic, many nations of the world have suffered, and now more than ever, cooperation among countries is absolutely crucial. While some have sought to criticize our relationships, in particular with countries like Cuba, it is those very relationships that we can draw lessons from during these difficult times. Today, I wish to address this House on the great accomplishments of the Cuban health system and convey unwavering support to the people of Cuba. Honorable members, Cuba has one of the highest ratios of doctors in the world, with 8.2 doctors per 1,000 people. This is 3 times the rate the United States, which has 2.6 doctors per 1,000 people. Cuba's mortality rate is equally as impressive, with a rate of 4 per 1,000 beds, which is lower than that in the US, despite US having all the resources at its disposal. Cuba struggles with shortages of medicine in its pharmacies as a result of the US sanctions regime, but it has found ways to continue improving its universal health care for the Cuban population. Cuba spends 23% of its national budget on healthcare and 30% on education, comprising a total of 53% on education and health combined, compared to the United States, which spends 28% on health and education combined. Honorable members, I must further note that Cuba's successful health system has been an example for the rest of the world. Cuba has the world's largest medical schools, specifically the Havana Latin American School of Medicine, which has provided free education to 35,000 doctors from 138 countries since 1999. Scholarships to the medical schools include full tuition, textbooks, accommodation, meals, and a stipend. Graduates are encouraged to participate on the front lines in low-income and medically undeserved communities. Cuba has shown a commitment to producing doctors who are prepared to put their lives on the line, both at home and abroad, to save lives. Currently, Cuba has 50,000 doctors working in 61 countries at one time, which is a feat not even the most developed countries can rival. It is truly remarkable that a small island nation, which has enjoyed economic sanctions imposed by the US over 60 years, can have accomplished so much for the betterment of humankind. Honorable members, earlier in February this year, President Ramaphosa announced that the South African government will nominate the Cuban Medical Brigade for Nobel Peace Prize, following its assistance in the fight against the spread of COVID-19. President Ramaphosa noted that South African cabinet has approved the proposal to nominate the Henry Reeve International contingent of doctors specialized in disaster situations and serious epidemics, or as they commonly are known, the Cuban Medical Brigade, for 2021 Nobel Peace Prize. Honorable members, when the country experienced a rise in COVID-19 infections in April 2020, 217 Cuban doctors from various disciplines arrived to aid in the fight against the virus. The brigade was then divided into groups and deployed to regions across the country. President Ramaphosa described the intervention, open quote, selfless and unwavering assistance, close quote, by the government and people of Cuba. President Ramaphosa stated that, open quote, true to its history, this small island has demonstrated solidarity with the hardest hit countries and sent more than 3,700 Cubans throughout the world to assist in the fight against COVID-19. In Africa alone, the brigade had treated more than 38,000 people by the end of November 2020. The Cuban Medical Brigade is currently still active in many countries, including here in South Africa. As the African National Congress, we extend our sincerest gratitude to the people of Cuba for this great demonstration of solidarity and humanity. Honorable members, I wish further to add that as the African National Congress, we continue to call on the United States to remove all the illegal economic embargo blockade against the Republic of Cuba. We further call on the South African government to increase trade between South Africa and Cuba as a reinforcement of our foreign policy and international solidarity with Cuba. And we call upon the DA-led Western Cape provincial government to cease its discriminatory action of denying opportunities for deserving youth from the Western Cape to study in Cuba. And in these words, Chairperson, House Chair, I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Mpanza. I now recognize Honorable J.F. Mare.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, we are grateful to the Cubans to assist in fighting the COVID pandemic, but we are immensely grateful to our own healthcare workers and soldiers, many of whom made the ultimate sacrifice with their lives. They are our heroes forever. The Cuban medical assistance has another side that paints a picture of embarrassment, arrogance, illegal and unauthorized actions by those who are entrusted to secure our safety and who must comply with our laws and regulations, especially with regards to our safety, healthcare, and medicine. The Military Command Council, the Chief of the SANDF, and the Minister of Defense seemingly saw themselves above the laws and regulations of our country when they illegally and without the required import permits transported unregistered and unauthorized Cuban drugs to be used against COVID virus. Both the WHO and SAPRA have not approved the Hebron interferon alpha 2B in the fight against the COVID pandemic. It thus remains unregistered and unauthorized for its use on humans against COVID infections and hospitalization. These are the bizarre facts and how it was justified. The Military Command Council, with the support of the Minister, resolved to procure this Cuban medicine to build the immune systems of our soldiers based only on the assessment of its use in Cuba and China. The Minister was apparently not aware of import requirements and SAHPRA's authority on medicine. Seemingly, she also didn't see the need to consult her own cabinet colleagues. The Military Command Council decided unilaterally we are in a state of war, that we are facing a biological warfare threat, and assumed powers and authorities not delegated to them. They decided due to the urgency, they do not have to comply with normal import requirements, authorization by SAHPRA, and declarations of these medicines at the ports of entry. Only on the 27th of August, a first Article 21 application was made to SAHPRA for bulk use, which was rejected. A second application on the 5th of October for 10 vials for one person was approved, and a third application on 21 October for bulk was also rejected. On 3 SAA chartered flights in April, July, and August last year, an order of 1.3 million vials, plus just over 970,000 at a cost of $15 million were illegally transported under false and misleading declarations. In layman's terms, that sounds like smuggling to me. The Military Command Council apparently required a complete medical service assistance from Cuba, part of which is the Cuban doctors' demands to use this medicine as their medicine of choice on patients, notwithstanding that it was not registered and unauthorized in South Africa. The Auditor General has done investigations and thus far found that the false importation declarations and that the devices attached to the medicine indicated that 40% of the consignments were exposed to conditions outside the prescribed 2 to 8 degrees centigrade, which makes it of no value anymore. Only now the Defence Force wants to apply to SAHPRA for the use for clinical trials as a service to the world, mainly Cuba and China. We do not have the resources, and it should be their responsibility to get the WHO to approve it. Today, the stock of Cuban medicine remains illegal, unregistered, and thus irregular and wasteful expenditure, a further burden on the defense budget. Will someone be held responsible and accountable? Don't hold your breath. If you rely on the Minister of Defense and the Commander-in-Chief to set an example. Not a pretty picture, if you ask me. I thank you, sir.
Thank you. I now recognize Honorable Thembekwayo.
Thank you, Chairperson. Since the early years of Cuban Revolution, its former leader, Fidel Castro, made it clear that the universal health care and internationalism would be key to the country's strategy. The medical workers belong to Henry Reeve Emergency Medical Contingent and is known as Cuban Medical Brigade and has since helped 3.5 million people in 21 countries affected by disasters such as floods, earthquakes, hurricanes, including outbreaks of Ebola in the West Africa. Fidel Castro made it clear in 2005 what the center in the times of crisis is, and I quote, "This is not a war between human diseases against repeating calamities. And one of the first things this world should learn, especially now with the changes that are taking place and the phenomenon of this type, is to cooperate." Since 1963, Cuba has sent more than 400,000 healthcare professionals to work in 164 countries by helping both relief as well as access to healthcare for the living, including those in remote areas, since they have been trained to work in hazardous and high-risk areas, thereby spreading their international communist solidarity to the rest of the world. Cuba does so in its revolutionary solidarity ideas with those in need around the globe as they are considered internationalist heroes. In 2019, more than 28,000 Cuban health professionals were working for 59 countries which benefited from Cubans' medical internationalism before the outbreak of coronavirus. As the world was fighting to stop COVID-19 claiming more lives, Cuban dispatched more than 593 medical workers to 14 countries in their battle against the pandemic, of which Italy was the first country to receive the first Cuban medical teams. To date, other countries are still continuing to receive medical help from Cuban doctors, including South Africa. On the 26th of April 2020, South Africa welcomed 217 Cuban doctors. The economic freedom fighters heartily welcomed the Cuban doctors who arrived to help the people of South Africa in the war against COVID-19 for socialist solidarity. The Cuban doctors did arrive, yes, irrespective of the so many challenges that their country is facing, which include an illegal and illegitimate embargo by the American government. Like the Eastern Cape was allocated medical officers whose roles including expertise which are critical in design, installation, adjusting, repairing, and provision of technical support. They have by far managed to make a difference in the fight against COVID-19 in the Eastern Cape. Through their impactful intervention and their undying efforts, people have been prevented from getting sick. Noting that the importance of the medical officers in the primary healthcare is their specialty, their data analytics and information management has been key in assessing the impact of intervention strategies throughout the provinces where they are deployed. In Gauteng province, for an example, members of the Cuban Medical Brigade are mainly working in quarantine and isolation sites, including hospitals where there has been noticeable spread of the virus. The deployment in Limpopo was based on areas where a shortage of human resources was identified. Such Cuban doctors were also deployed to the Western Cape, Free State, and other provinces. Since their arrival in April, they have treated more than 30,000 patients and they have saved more lives, and we are thankful for that. Their presence has reduced workload and pressure on staff members, and they have also provided much relief. The EFF appreciates and still stands by the belief that Cuba is a friend, not only to South Africa, but the entire African continent. We appreciate the assistance that is being given not only to South Africa, but from Angola to Cape Verde and to many other parts of the world, because of Cuba has always proven that socialist solidarity is the way to go. Why is Cuba, Chairperson, a unique and special nation? It is unique and special because it has Fidel Castro and Ernesto Che Guevara as outstanding pioneers of progressive internationalism. It is unique and special because Cuban children grow up and were taught how to be selfless and dedicated themselves to serve the humanity of others. Their progressive internationalism stems from their early revolutionary teachings. Every Cuban child in nursery schools, in school courtyards, chants every morning, hands raised in salutation in honor of Che Guevara's selfless sacrifices to the people of the world. When asked, who do you like to be? They reply, we want to be like Che. Honorable Chairperson, we now know why Cuban doctors are a rare, unique, and special breed. We too must desire to be like Che. Forward to progressive internationalism, forward. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Thembekwayo. I now recognize Honorable Mthembu from the African National Congress.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Honorable Chair, the African National Congress have a commitment that is stipulated in the Freedom Charter that says there shall be peace and friendship. And this is the cornerstone and foundation of our foreign policy perspective. The principle of peace and friendship enjoins the ANC-led government and other nations of the world to respect each other's sovereignty and independence. There is an appreciation of the need to work together by states in order to transform and improve conditions in the global community. As the ANC, we are advancing the agenda of building a better Africa and a better world, and that can be done through continental and international solidarity. It is our firm belief that multilateralism is a foreign policy advancement is a powerful instrumental approach in attaining global peace and stability. There is a need for global progressive forces to work together in building a better world. The agenda of building a better Africa and a better world require practical measures which include forging alliances guided by the advancement of our national interest and our broader strategic objectives. The common perspective among the progressive states is to transform the global governance institutions to reflect the realities of our time. By progressive internationalism, we mean, among the things, the liberation of the oppressed people from the bondage of colonialism and imperialism. It is through organizing progressive forces that we can influence the geopolitics and actually make a significant contribution in the changing the lives of the people. Cuba is one of our progressive allies that, from the point of view of its contribution to our struggle for liberation of the continent in general. The Cuban commitment to the liberation struggles is consistent with the heritage of Cuban revolution and is actively supported by the Cuban population. Cuba, on its own liberation, focuses mostly on technical skills and expertise. These covers areas of military training and medical expertise, as well as advanced technology. There is preparedness by Cuban people to have positive contribution in the lives of the people in the world. We have seen the role that Cuba played in the liberation struggle of many countries in Africa. In 1961, Cuba decided to formally join the non-aligned forces. So many African states gained their independence with the contribution and support of Cuba. The Cubans decided to stand with the people of Africa. The Cuban people were one of the first nations that spoke out against the racial segregation system in South Africa. Under the leadership of Fidel Castro, and from the onset, they have been able to support the people of South Africa. The Cuban people are the most accurate example of what progressive force is in the true sense of the word, and they are always prepared to provide support whenever a need arises. The Cubans supported the armed struggle of liberation movement of South Africa, Mozambique, Guinea-Bissau, and Angola. Through their commitment to human development in the African continent, Cuba provided different forms from military training bases, weapons, and actually sending the troops to support progressive forces. Angola experienced a civil war, and Cuba provided military support to the movement for the liberation of Angola. In 1987, Chairperson, the Angola army was supported by Cuba in fighting against the rebel group of UNITA that was supported by the then South African Defense Force of the apartheid regime. The Battle of Cuba Valley was one of the outstanding cases of how the Cuban intervention continued to support the human development, and by sending troops to fight for the liberation of Angola and tried to ensure that Pretoria did not dominate Angola. The final outcome of the war did not only have impact in Angola, but they went beyond the border lines of Angola and also created a strong foundation of defeating the apartheid regime in South Africa. The defeat of this then South African Defence Force in Angola created an opportunity for the liberation movement to enter into negotiations with the enemy. The Cuban committed in supporting the call for liberation struggle in Africa, and they supported selflessly, and hence, after the Battle of Cuba, Fidel Castro said, open quote, "We were not looking for military glory or military victory. We were looking for a just political solution to the conflict. That was our main objective. That's why the possibility of negotiations was not discarded," close quote. That is clear indication that intervention of Cuba was not about Cuba, but was really about the lives of the people of Angola, and that their rights to self-determination must be respected all the time. The Cuban people did not only end with the support in the fight for liberation, instead they continued to provide support even in the post-independence period. As we know, the period of taking over governance by many liberation movement is a challenging period. One of the major challenges that the liberation movement faces when they get power is the shortage of skills and facilities to develop human resources. South Africa, after attaining democracy, strengthened its ties with Cuba. This was led by President Nelson Mandela. The diplomatic relations were cemented, and the leadership of the two heads of state, that is Fidel Castro and Nelson Mandela. In the context of South Africa, there was a shortage of doctors to support the new primary health care system in the democratic dispensation. While on the other hand,
thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Honorable Sink from the IFP.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Before we turn our attention to the subject of today, it is with great sadness and heavy hearts that the Inkatha Freedom Party heard of the untimely death of seasoned journalist Karima Brown. On behalf of the IFP, I would like to extend my deepest condolences to the family, friends, and colleagues of Ms. Brown. Having said that, Honorable Chairperson, I think the contribution of Cuba, and particularly the medical fraternity and Cuba's contribution to Africa and democracy, cannot be gainsaid and underestimated. We value the contribution made by Cuba to the rest of Africa. But having said that, and whilst we received 217 medical personnel and other personnel from Cuba, let us not forget, Honorable Chairperson, that 400 of South African medical personnel, including nurses and healthcare workers, perished and died from COVID-19 pandemic. So whilst we laud the contribution of the Cuban doctors and Cuba, we must also note the losses of these members in South Africa. And if there has to be a Nobel Peace Prize nomination like our cabinet has done, surely we must consider all these people in our country as a unit that lost their lives. Having said that, Honorable Chairperson, in the speech of 1st of February, the Honorable President stated, and I quote, "Since the very first case of COVID-19 was discovered in our country, we have mobilized all our resources at our disposal to protect the lives and livelihood of all South Africans," close quote. With due respect, Mr. President, we have not mobilized all of the resources at our disposal. We have a number of South Africans who have gone abroad through no fault of their own to study medicine. Because universities in South Africa do not have the capacity, they go abroad at their own cost and at great sacrifices. They go and study, and they find it so difficult when they come back to South Africa to register as doctors, to write board exams, and to be recognized for internships. And that is because the HPCSA, the Health Professionals Council of South Africa, still doesn't know what it's doing in terms of how to deal with these South Africans who go and train abroad. I'm going to take advantage, Honorable Chairperson, of the fact that the Minister of International Relations is going to be speaking in this debate, because I also want to remind us of the fact that because of diplomatic relationships in 1996, Honorable Tata Matiba had 10 of our students go to Cuba and study medicine. In 2011, it was expanded to 800. By 2017, there are 4,000 South Africans training there. Now, Honorable Chairperson, I was in Cuba about a year and a half ago with the Honorable Speaker on a visit, and we met these South African students who are going through extreme hardship. Now, I wrote to the Honorable President, our President at that time, to say, why don't we consider an additional medical institution in South Africa, even if it's in the most rural of areas? He wrote back to me and said, I'm referring the matter to the Minister of Higher Education and the Minister of Health. And I received no response whatsoever on this because the private sector was prepared. Now, my view is that instead of sending our students there, let us get some of these Cuban academics and professionals to an institution in South Africa, a truly South African institution where our students can train. And coincidentally, Honorable Chairperson, the Minister of Higher Education at that time was the Honorable current Minister of International Relations and Cooperation. So I hope, Minister, that you together with the Minister of Health would look into the effectiveness of us sending these 4,000 students all the way to Cuba to study, when, yes, we need them to study, we need them to become doctors here in South Africa. Could we not, in the medium to long term, create facilities for them to study here and add to the medical profession here in South Africa? And I make that appeal to you and leave it with you, Minister. Thank you.
Time is up. Thank you. I now recognize Honorable Van Staden.
Geagte voorsitter, Suid-Afrikaners en veral ons gesondheidswerkers sluk maar swaar aan die president se aankondiging dat die Kubaanse mediese werkers benoem gaan word vir die Henry Reeve mediese begraade Nobelprys vir vrede vir hul werk wat hier gedoen is tydens COVID-19. Die vraag is, waarom sal die regering hierdie mense benoem terwyl ons eie land se gesondheidswerkers basies geen erkenning kry vir die uiters moeilike omstandighede waaronder hulle moet werk sonder of baie min hulp wat betref medisyne, beddens of geen voldoende persoonlike beskermende toerusting nie. Die COVID-19 sterftesyfer onder ons eie gesondheidswerkers was die 5 hoogste in die wêreld gewees. Die VF+ het reeds in April 2020 gewaarsku dat 'n tekort aan mediese toerusting 'n uiters kritieke stadium gaan bereik en dit het ook toe so gebeur. Daar was berigte gewees van gesondheidswerkers wat van plastiek moes gebruik maak om gesigmaskers vir hul gesigte te maak om hulle te probeer beskerm teen moontlike infeksies. In 2020 was 60,000 gesondheidswerkers op die punt om te staar oor hul nie beskermende klere en toerusting gehad het nie. Die VF+ het voortdurend daarop gewys dat die regering eerder gebruik moet maak van plaaslike afgetrede dokters se kundigheid in hierdie pandemie. In Julie 2020 het die minister van Gesondheid 'n regulasie uitgevaardig waarin afgetrede medici opgeroep kan word om dienste verrig tydens COVID-19. Dit het nog steeds nie gebeur nie en die regering het eerder 217 Kubaanse dokters ingevoer wat die land 'n enorme 240 miljoen rand gekos het. Dit kan gesien word as 'n klap in die gesig van ons plaaslike gesondheidswerkers. Ons eie gesondheidswerkers maak nog steeds groot opofferinge in uiters moeilike omstandighede en ons eie mense behoort toegeken te word met 'n medalje vir dapperheid want hulle is ons helde. In January this year, it came to light that a massive 40,000 posts are vacant in the Department of Health. Several qualified unemployed doctors are struggling to find work in South Africa. In November 2020, several medical interns were informed that they could not do their 2-year practical at hospitals because there was no money to pay for them. In Gauteng alone during 2020, there were no less than 500 qualified unemployed doctors in the province concerned. Thus, the Cubans are only needed in a crisis, like in the beginning of this pandemic, because they are good in the combating of pandemics, but they should have been immediately sent back as soon as matters were under control, but on the long term, they are not the solution to our health problems. Due to our complex health system, they are not qualified to work in our hospitals, and they may not be allowed to slip in at the back door to work here permanently without the necessary accreditation. Doctors studying in Cuba must first write supplementary study and examinations in South Africa to be accredited. Daar word wyd berig dat Cuba se grootste uitvoerproduk mediese sorg is. Die tydskrif Time het in 2018 berig dat 'n oorseese uitkontraktering van Cubaanse gesondheidswerkers sowat 11 miljard VSA dollar, dis 210 miljard rand per jaar vir die Cubaanse staatskas ingebring het. Dit terwyl Cubaanse dokters op buitelandse sendings soos hierdie slegs tussen 10 en 25% van hulle salaris ontvang. Die res gaan aan die Cubaanse regering. The FF Plus would like to thank every healthcare worker in South Africa for all their hard work and sacrifices they make, and they are not only regarded as our fighters in the front lines against the pandemic, but they are South Africa's heroes. Thank you to each and everyone for all your hard work. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you. I now invite Honorable Swart from ACDP.
Thank you, House Chair. Tomorrow will mark a full year since the first case of COVID-19 was reported in the country. This led to one of the world's longest and hardest lockdowns, with loss of life and a devastating impact on the economy, business, employment, and public finances. And to date, just over 50,000 people have tragically died from COVID-related illnesses. The ACDP wishes to thank, again, all the frontline medical practitioners for their hard work and sacrifices, with some 400 sadly passing as a result of COVID-19. We would again like to extend our deepest condolences to their family and friends, as well as to those of journalist Karima Brown, who also has sadly passed on. Given the pending pandemic, a large group of Cuban healthcare workers were welcomed to South Africa to help fight COVID-19. Whilst Cuba and SA have had a long history of shared medical resources, this mission did raise eyebrows, not only for its alleged cost of some 239 million, but also because of the difficulties many foreign-trained local doctors have experienced in finding work. We recognize, however, that internationally Cuban doctors have won admiration for work done, for example, in the Ebola crisis in West Africa, in treating Chernobyl victims, and in the Honduras, as well as their deployment to some 60 countries at this time. However, at the time of their arrival in South Africa, both the South African Medical Association and Nurses Union, the NOSA, expressed deep concerns. SAMA said their arrival was, quote, premature, while the NOSA described government's actions as unpatriotic, as many local nurses and doctors were then sitting without work. Hopefully that situation has changed, given the urgent need of frontline medical practitioners to fight COVID-19. The Cuban doctors were also able to have their medical registration organized within days at quite a cost of some more than 700,000 to the South African government. This caused very great unhappiness with foreign-trained South African doctors, many of whom have battled for years to obtain their registration with the council in order to be able to work here. While we appreciate that every foreign medical school must be properly assessed by the council, why do other countries recognize these medical schools but South Africa apparently not? Surely at the height of COVID-19, we need every medical practitioner. Lastly, the ACDP also shares the concerns expressed about the Cuban medicines that were brought to South Africa illegally by the Military Command Council, which has resulted in millions of rands of wasteful and irregular expenditure, which the country can ill afford at this time. I thank you, House Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Swart. I now recognize the UDM. I now recognize the ATM. I now invite Honorable Ismail from the Democratic Alliance.
Thank you, Chair. Nationally or internationally, it seems that the ANC values political connections over the social and economic well-being of its own people. In its attempt to strengthen ties and political relations between the two nations, the ANC and the Cuban government developed the Nelson Mandela Fidel Castro Medical Collaboration Program. The idea is that we send our students to Cuba on a fully funded medical program, as Cuba is known for its medical profession output. The problem arises, however, when the ANC sends over 200 medical students to Cuba and leaves them to fend for themselves in a uniquely difficult environment. This means that they are not able to buy any proper meals, as the staple diet in Cuba is only beans, soup, and rice. Female students are left without dignity, as they do not have adequate access to sanitary pads or much needed toiletries, as is simply not available in Cuba. These students have reached out to government on many occasions, but alas, their plights have fallen on deaf ears. They've been ignored for years, with evidence of the same issues arising from 2017. This program has a massive cost and even worse, suffering. Additionally, the ANC has visited Cuba on numerous occasions and know very well in what conditions our South African medical students live. The money spent on this program could much better be utilized by investing in local medical centers and institutions. But it seems that the ANC values political connections over the mental, physical, and emotional health of our own people. The loss of South African healthcare workers' lives seem to mean nothing to the ANC government. While we are grateful for the good work the Cuban doctors have done in South Africa, and we appreciate any effort and assistance from foreign countries or organizations, we cannot ignore the fact that the ANC government seeks to strengthen political relations over supporting its own people. The government sought to contract foreign medical doctors from Cuba at the cost of 239 million rand to taxpayers, rather than integrating our own community service doctors into the healthcare system. Community service doctors are waiting to be placed, and there are no efforts by government to expedite the process to integrate these doctors, although each province has highlighted the dire need for more health staff. The reality is that we paid a monumental amount for the Cuban Medical Brigade, and it is unclear if this amount was worth it in terms of the outputs that could have been gained through insourcing these functions and utilizing more of our own healthcare professionals. What was then even more unusual and shocking, despite the stringent condition our healthcare workers faced under the pandemic, the ANC cabinet completely sidelined the efforts and difficulties and decided to nominate the Cuban doctors for the Nobel Peace Prize. This, even though taxpayers paid for the Cuban Medical Brigade. Government further ignored major efforts from NGOs, such as the Gift of the Givers, who provided assistance to South Africa at no cost to taxpayers. Our healthcare workers put their lives on the line to protect and support South Africans during the pandemic. We have lost hundreds of healthcare workers to COVID. Our thoughts and prayers go out to their families. To all our healthcare workers, we thank you for all your time, effort, and sacrifices to serve our country. I sincerely hope that the ANC can start putting the needs of South Africans first, so we can save the lives of our nation.
Thank you. Honorable Njabula Nzuza from the African National Congress, you are recognized.
Honorable Chairperson, members of the executive, honorable members of parliament, fellow South Africans. The 18th Bromley on Louis Bonaparte teaches us that men make their own history, but they do not make it as they please. They do not make it under self-selected circumstances, but under circumstances existing already given and transmitted from the past. It is therefore impossible to imagine our beautiful motherland as we know it today without acknowledging the extraordinary and selfless role played by the Cuban people in shaping our democracy that is today respected all over the world. The Cuban Revolution against the military dictatorship of Batista did not just inspire revolutionaries all over the world to wage a relentless struggle against oppression and injustice. It also gave birth to a reliable and dependable ally for the world in the fight against oppression and injustice. The selflessness of the Cuban people after attaining their own freedom drove them to continue the fight for freedom and took a stand against oppressors across the globe. There should be no doubt in our minds that the Cuban people have always stood in solidarity for justice, fairness, and freedom. It is therefore our revolutionary duty as the people of South Africa to stand in solidarity with the people of Cuba, because the very fabric of our society bears imprints of the sacrifices made by the Cuban people. True to their selfless character, the Cuban people have continued to share their medical knowledge with the rest of the world. They dispatched highly skilled medical professionals to our country in the fight against the deadly COVID-19 pandemic. The Cuban Medical Brigade left behind their families, children, wives, and the comfort of their own homes to stand in solidarity with our people, not only in word but in action. The Cuban government has, during the difficult period of COVID-19 pandemic, sent out about 593 medical workers to up to 14 countries across the globe in the battle against COVID-19 pandemic. This was in addition to more than 28,000 health professionals who already provided services in 59 countries before COVID-19. If this is not a true measure of international solidarity and selflessness, then we surely do not understand the value that must be placed in solidarity in action. The people of Cuba have made these contributions to the world whilst faced with great adversity. Whilst they go all over the world to help those in need, the Cubans back home struggled to import basic life-saving PPE, ventilators, and medical supplies, which are critical in the fight against COVID-19. This is all due to the senseless, irrational, and inhumane economic and financial embargoes imposed on Cuba by the United States of America. The United States has for more than half a century unilaterally imposed economic, financial, and commercial blockages against Cuba. The United States has done this despite their actions being repeatedly condemned by the United Nations General Assembly. The arrogance of the United States has stood despite 185 countries voting for the end of the US embargo against Cuba in 2008. The economic blockages against Cuba are the most extensive by the United States government, far-reaching than the sanctions imposed to states designated by the United States government as state sponsors of terrorism. The Trump administration introduced about 240 economic measures against Cuba, tightening the already existing systematic laws against Cuba. The blockage by the United States is the single main hindrance in the development of Cuba. The embargo has had devastating effects on social, economic, and human development in Cuba. This has, in the main, affected the most vulnerable in Cuba. The blockage against the Cuban people is the most unjust, severe, and most prolonged system of unilateral coercive action applied against any country. The US blockage of Cuba is evidence that imperialism still lives and continues in its greedy path and quest for power and control. It seeks to force all of us into market fundamentalism that benefits those who own the means of production. Modern imperialism does not show itself physical presence and control, but it uses tools like trade embargoes to control other countries and undermine their sovereignty. We can never shy away and turn our backs on the Cuban people. We will stand with them just as they stood with us in the fight for our own liberation. When the imperial forces infested Africa, it was the Cuban people who stood firm in Cape Verde, Algeria, Ethiopia, the DRC, Congo-Brazzaville, Mozambique, Angola, and Namibia. We can never forget the bravery of the Cuban detachment in the Battle of Cuito Cuernavaca in 1988. All these events played a critical role into the liberation of South Africa and shaped our democracy as we know it today. Imperialists have never given up. They continue to use the tool of trade embargoes against those not willing to succumb to their power and dominance. They fear to lose what they stole from us. They fight with all they have to keep our land, thus making us paupers in the land of our forefathers. Imperialism understands that political power is nothing close to economic power. They understand that for them to prosper, they must keep a tight grip on the economy and undermine any other thing. They strive to use Cuba as an example of what happens to those who do not succumb to free market fundamentalism. They exert themselves and impose sanctions as they please. They do not care about the implications, even if it means condemning millions to poverty and hunger. The Zimbabwean sanctions are an example of the brutality of the imperial regime that continues to usher fear and set the conditions for our growth and development. South Africa is one of the most unequal societies in the world because they stripped us of our land, which is our wealth and the lifeblood of any nation. They continue to usher threats through markets and forex exchanges that if we do not leave the structure of the economy as it is, our economy will collapse. These are nothing but warfare tactics to keep us at bay whilst they continue to loot our wealth. They expect us to keep quiet and be happy with the negotiated settlement. We must always remember that our loyalty should always be to the majority of our people. We must rebel and stand firm like the Cuban people, never to succumb to imperialism. We must fight with all that we have for our people to have equal opportunities and equal share in the economy. We must strive to build an equal society, because an unequal society is an unjust society. Honorable Chairperson, recognizing the Cuban people does not mean we do not recognize the millions of our people who have stood together against the fight against the pandemic. The Cubans, they fought for our liberations in the hands of our oppressors. The Cuban people have over time consistently sent healthcare practitioners to the world, spreading love and health, and never war. The Cuban Medical Brigade has continued to be a shining example of solidarity that is about standing together and helping each other at the face of great adversity. Today, Chairperson, we must honor the contribution made by the Cuban Medical Brigade in the fight against the greatest global threat in recent times. The contribution by the Cuban Medical Brigade in medical health care to the world is remarkable. The ANC agrees with His Excellency President Ramaphosa that the Cuban Medical Brigade must be recognized for their selfless and heroic actions. Therefore, we support the nomination for the Cuban Medical Brigade for the Nobel Peace Prize. Honorable Chairperson, we do not just stand in solidarity with the Cuban people because it is fashionable. We stand in solidarity with the Cuban people because it is our revolutionary duty to do so. How can we stand tall having forsaken those that have given so much to humanity? We must never rest till the unjust US embargoes against the people of Cuba are brought to an end. Thank you.
You can rest now. Thank you. I now recognize Honorable Sheikh Imam.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, allow me to start off by thanking and commending the Cubans for having provided their medical assistance to South Africa and many other countries. And also allow me to thank Cuba particularly and their former leader Fidel Castro for the role that he has played in the liberation of South Africa and also Angola, and the role they continue to play in Africa. And despite all the sanctions by this one major monster in the world, the United States of America, I think the Cubans have still rose above the occasion and put emphasis on education and health. Having said that, however, Chairperson, I think it is not acceptable that we as South Africans, with so many healthcare workers and doctors who put their lives at risk, would rather go and nominate Cuban doctors for the prize of Nobel Peace Prize, when in fact we've even had institutions like the Gift of the Givers who have done a fantastic piece of work, not just in South Africa, but in many other parts of the world. So, you know, I really cannot seem to understand the rationale behind it. But having said that, at the same time, whilst we have employed, and I must repeat, employed at a great cost many Cuban doctors into South Africa to help fight and combat COVID-19, hundreds of doctors, if not thousands of them in South Africa, including clinical associates where we paid millions of rands to train, remain unemployed. Now, I can't seem to understand the logic behind it. You have medical experts in your country, you keep them unemployed, you keep them starving and hungry, and you go out and import healthcare workers. Now, let me give you another example. We have gone one step further in sending our medical interns or trainees to Cuba to go and train at an exorbitant cost. And I can tell you at one stage, the Rajpal University in India offered to set up a medical university in South Africa. And I was told that the cost of training doctors are too much. But look at the amount of money that it has been costing us to train them and under what conditions in Cuba. And remember, Cuba's system is completely different to ours. We can never ever come close to the system that Cuba has got because we have a capitalist system. They've put emphasis on better healthcare prevention rather than what we are doing in South Africa. So while the National Freedom Party acknowledges and appreciates the role that they have played, we believe that if there's anybody, then it is our own healthcare workers that should be conferred the prize of a Nobel Peace Prize and institutions like Gift of the Givers. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I now invite the Independent Congress, COPE, the PAC. I now recognize Honorable Hendricks from Al Jamaa.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. Honorable Chair, some honorable members keep themselves young as if they were not around in the 60s and 70s when Cuba helped us with the struggle and the resistance to overthrow apartheid. I see the Minister of International Relations is the next speaker, and while she's young at heart, I'm sure she will not hide the fact that she was also around in the 60s and the 70s. The COVID-19 pandemic overwhelmed healthcare systems worldwide, and through all this crisis, this Caribbean island, Cuba, or the communist country, many on the far right detest, came to the rescue of several countries, providing them with qualified doctors to fight back the virus. Al Jamaa therefore support the government's PPE consignment sent to Cuba. Lest we forget our anti-apartheid struggle was accelerated by the solidarity and support received from the Cubans. So the younger honorable members of this House, they must not be around. But we are here to remind them of the revolutionary role the Cubans have always paid. We owe them a debt that can never be repaid. And by sending PPE on humanitarian grounds to the Cubans, South Africa owes no apologies to everyone. This House owes no apologies to everyone. The governing party owes no apologies to anyone. Al Jamaa owes no apologies to anyone. Thank you very much, Honorable Chair.
Thank you. I now recognize the Honorable Minister from the African National Congress, Menaledi Pandor.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Chairperson, indeed, the Honorable Hendricks is right. I was around in the 60s and 70s, and I continue to be around now. And God willing, for some time. Chairperson and honorable members, colleagues, I must say I'm really quite disgusted at the whinging and whining when we should be celebrating the support that our country received in this massive battle against COVID-19. Colleagues are not asking themselves the reasons for the success South Africa has had in avoiding the high level of deaths and infections that we're seeing in many countries around the world. And it is the support that the government correctly got from the people of Cuba and from professionals in Cuba that has made a contribution to where we are today at level 1. So I think let's just stop the whinging and whining and let's acknowledge the important contribution that a multidisciplinary team, not just doctors, multidisciplinary team of professionals from Cuba made to South Africa. Honorable Mpanza, I congratulate you for introducing this debate and sincerely welcome it. I also join members in expressing heartfelt sympathy to the family, friends, and colleagues of the veteran journalist, Ms. Karima Brown. This debate, I believe, reaffirms the moral value of the revolutionary and scientific duty of human solidarity in dealing with crises such as COVID-19. This is what we're talking about, human solidarity globally. It does not in any way detract from our grateful thanks and appreciation for the supreme role of our healthcare workers in South Africa and other frontline workers who played an important role in combating this, but no contribution can be reduced to nil because of our political sentiment toward Cuba. Now that we have benefited
We cannot suddenly throw back the generosity. The Republic of Cuba has been a vital embodiment of humanism and international solidarity since the triumph of the Cuban Revolution in 1963. Those who've not known oppression will not appreciate the absolutely important role Cuba contributed toward our freedom. They won't appreciate that solidarity because they didn't play any role in that regard. This Cuban solidarity has continued a long history of strategic relations between our two peoples, inspired by a shared vision of freedom, anti-racism, anti-apartheid, and anti-imperialism. Human solidarity in the face of the COVID-19 threat is absolutely necessary for us as the global South, because many countries in the South lack the ability to respond to the ravages of this virus and remain vulnerable to a host of other debilitating yet preventable conditions. The compromised human condition, which has been shaped by an unfair history of racism, colonialism, and racial exploitation, is one that none of us can celebrate or allow to continue to exist. Leading by example, Cuba is among the nations of the South fully committed to human solidarity. I shudder to think what some of these members will do if another part of the world is faced with a challenge and South Africa has the ability to provide support. They will hide in their cupboards and do nothing from the way that they're speaking. Cuba has sent over 3,700 healthcare workers to more than 22 countries around the world to lend a helping hand in this hour of need. And it is that immensity that leads to a nomination such as the Nobel Peace Prize. We believe that human solidarity is very closely linked to our objectives of building a better Africa and a better world. Doing this will help us to correct the global injustices that are characterized by the structural conditions of underdevelopment that continue to subsist in South Africa and in large parts of the African continent. Cuba has been a leading force in supporting goals such as these, and its impact has been especially felt in the health sector, where Latin America, Asian, and African nations continue to reap the benefits of Cuba's medical diplomacy. Global solidarity is not just about how South Africa has benefited, it is how many, many others in the world have been beneficiaries of this ideological approach. Cuba's international health diplomacy is a stark reminder of both global inequality as well as the possibility of reimagining a better world where others help others, if the interests of people are put before profit. This humanist vision always pricks the conscience of the world through putting international reform of the public health sector and other sectors to the fore as a matter of human rights. Our late great President Nelson Mandela acknowledged and extolled the Cuban role in advancing the agenda of the South during a speech at a banquet in honor of President Castro in 1998 September. He spoke of the relations between our country and Cuba and said, "The defeat of apartheid demonstrated what can be achieved when we join hands globally with purpose and conviction. South Africa is committed to working with Cuba to help build a better life for millions of people across both our continents and beyond. It is through Cuba that Idukwa would see a medical engineer present in the local hospital, an epidemiologist ready to provide appropriate support, biostatisticians available in Malamulele to provide help." As Madiba explained, our country is committed to working with Cuba for the attainment of a better world. The Cuban Medical Brigade, working with such acclaimed commitment, and dedications to save lives in all parts of our country, including the most rural, has exalted this vision of building a better society. Our strategic relations with Cuba advance this agenda of a better Africa, and we have considerably benefited, as has the continent, from this approach. The Health International Solidarity is epitomized by the Nelson Mandela Castro Medical Collaboration. The program, established by both presidents in 1996, serves as an important spur to increasing the health professionals of South Africa. It has addressed the over-concentration of health personnel in urban areas and in the exclusionary private sector, as well as increased the number of qualified health professionals. Honorable members, the presence of over 200 Cuban medical professionals in our country has helped us to fight this pandemic, has supported our own health workers. They have been a partner, they have been a collaborator in the fight against COVID-19. Of course, we've seen really disgraceful insinuations, misinformation, and distortion related to their presence in the country, but we know the contribution they've made to help us battle this virus. They have excelled in primary healthcare and prevention. They excel in preventing diseases. Their experience has buttressed our health workers and our health system and made a difference to the lives of thousands of South Africans. It is for this reason that our president and South Africa have nominated the Henry Reeve International Contingent of Doctors specialized in disaster situations and serious epidemics, known as the Cuban Medical Brigade, of which there are currently 3,700 dispatched all over the world in the fight against the pandemic for the 2021 Peace Prize. This was a resolution we took as cabinet, and it is a move widely supported by an international community that is aware and appreciative of the noble efforts of this group of professionals whose primary aim is to save human life. You've not heard a whisper of the whinging we hear today anywhere in the world. This recognition is pursued alongside our immense gratitude to our own healthcare workers. And I think to seek to divide and rule by suggesting we don't appreciate our own healthcare workers is merely selfish innuendo, which doesn't take us anywhere. Our recognition of the brigade is part and parcel of this international solidarity and of South-South relations, which we strongly support. We call on all South Africans to support this process and recognize the humane agenda driven by Cuba. Few would forget that members of the Cuban leadership traveled to Algiers to build formal relations with the Algerian National Liberation Front, and the fact that Che Guevara was in Africa in 1963, serving as an important part of a turning point in strengthening Cuba's relationship with liberation movements around the continent. Chairperson, building a better African world is an imperative of our time for all those concerned with global inequality. And Cuba is a strong component of fighting this battle. Thank you, Chairperson.
Hasta la vista siempre. Thank you. Viva Cuba.
Honorable Sergeant at Arms and the IT, please remove that member. I now recognize Honorable Wilson.
Thank you very much, Chair. This is a confusingly titled debate, I must confess. And we've heard plenty of speeches today with very different interpretations of the revolutionary and scientific duty of solidarity and humanity. But let's deal with facts today. The Mandela Castro Medical Program, which was initiated in 1996 and expanded in 2011, has become a bottomless pit of millions of rands annually. Anyone who assisted in the bringing down of apartheid, like Cuba, must indeed be applauded. It was abhorrent. But how long is the payback? At the outset, the program was supposed to train disadvantaged Black medical students and meet the health needs of rural and underserved urban areas. In 2017, there were approximately 4,000 doctors training in Cuba at a cost of approximately 2.2 million rand for each graduate. They are costing South Africa billions in taxpayers' monies. In 2018, approximately 700 very costly Cuban-trained doctors returned to South Africa. But without capacity in our system to supervise and monitor their skills, deal with the language barriers and training in a different language and culture became problematic. This resulted in South African medical schools having to provide 1 to 3 years of extended medical school training on their return at further costs of millions. And on completion of their extra years, exactly where are these graduates to go? Certainly not to the rural areas, because it is common knowledge that the rural medical facilities are virtually non-existent and absolutely appalling. Furthermore, the Cuban emphasis is on primary health and preventative care. But these students got very little or no exposure to HIV, TB, or trauma in Cuba, which is huge in South Africa. And while many of these graduates are desperate for positions, we bring in the Cuban Brigade at a huge cost. We don't need science to understand this, it's facts. So this costly project is merely about solidarity and politics, nothing more. It has become ever more apparent when this government nominated the Cuban Brigade for a Nobel Prize. I cannot find information about one Cuban doctor who died in South Africa as a result of COVID, but hundreds of South African health workers did. How do we put a Cuban brigade ahead of the thousands of South Africans who gave up their lives to save the lives of other South Africans? How much more evidence do we need that the lives of South Africans mean little to this ANC-led government? Honorable Pandor, the ANC does not put people before profit. And in actual fact, this has been apparent in the Zondo Commission, where exactly the opposite applies. We do not need more evidence that the lives of South African mean nothing to this government. It should be ashamed.
Thank you very much, Honorable Wilson. Thank you. Honorable members, at the beginning of the debate, Honorable Mpanza saved 3 minutes of his time. I'm going to assist him with maths and add the 3 minutes to the 2 that he has. He now has got 5 in closing the debate. Honorable Mpanza, you are now recognized.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chairperson, House Chair. First of all, let me thank all the honorable members who have contributed in this debate. And it has been a wonderful debate, I assume. And I want to start with the EFF, which has actually supported and acknowledged the revolution contribution that the Cuban people have done in solidarity with the whole world, and in particular our country over the years. And I think that is commendable, and we really appreciate it as an African National Congress. Of course, Chairperson, the DA is actually saying that this is a confusing debate. I have never heard something like that since I joined Parliament of a confusing debate. And I want to put it before the DA itself that it is the one that is confused. And therefore then, because it's confused, and then it says the debate is confused. Chairperson, we cannot undermine the role of our frontline healthcare workers. But Chair, I think it is regrettable that some of the opposition parties are completely or deliberately missing the point about this debate. And I want to agree and concur what the Minister Pandor is saying when he's saying that this debate actually is not premised into drawing comparisons between the Cuban doctors versus our frontline health workers, which is inclusive of our doctors and nurses. But the purpose of the debate today, House Chair, is to acknowledge the contribution and the role the Cuban people have played in fighting against all forms of injustices internationally, including injustices even here in South Africa. And I think the DA should be better informed as to what was the purpose of this debate than to label it as a confused debate. So, Chairperson, for some of the opposition parties here in this debate to compare the Cuban doctors versus our frontline health workers, really, Chair, is mischievous. And it's also dishonest. And they are actually playing in the political gallery.
And divide and rule.
And to score cheap political goals at the expense of the serious hardships that are associated with COVID pandemic that our people are experiencing currently. And we will call upon them to check their political consciences if they do have one. Or if they don't have political consciences, if they can check.
Your bonus has expired, Honorable Mpanza. Thank you. That concludes the business of this virtual mini-plenary. The mini-plenary will now rise. All rise. Thank you.
When was the last democratic election in Cuba?
Thank you.